We should start this panel by saying other business models are available, but we are here to talk about the studio business model and what that means and how one can leverage it for the global and globalized content market that we find ourselves in today. What do we mean by a studio business model? We mean a vertically integrated company that has touch points from financing, production, distribution, and some form of exhibition. Of course, exhibition is increasingly about streaming. But joining me today, we have a superb trio of experts in this space. To my immediate left, we have Maria Valenzuela from Movistar Plus. She is the General Manager of the International Division. To her left, we have Dana Stern, who is the founder of Yes Studios out of Israel. And on the far left, we have Daria Legoni-Fielko, who is a general producer and founder of the Ukrainian production company, Space. So let's get going and start talking about the studio business, the global content opportunity, the changes in the market, the dynamics of the industry today. Let's start by talking about how the direct model that is being employed by the big content owners has changed the business for you from your perspective. Maria, in your case, Movistar has just moved into distribution. It's been in production for 5-6 years now, and now has a major catalogue of both scripted and unscripted. But what has it meant for you, the changing dynamic of the industry?
Yeah, I think we've been incredibly lucky because in general in the industry there has been a growing appetite for international content. I think we have great shows. Spain as a country of production has great shows that had a great breakthrough, and it allowed the audience to get familiar with the Spanish production style and with the Spanish codes on fiction, and to know some of the casting and to have an appetite to see more. And that have all of a sudden been a great game changer. I think now maybe 8 years ago, content were redone in Latin America, for example, rather than seeing the original content. And all of a sudden, with the coming of the streamers, you have original content being consumed, sometimes subtitled, sometimes dubbed. In the case of Spanish content, Latin America is watching Spanish. But that wasn't the case before that, and that opened up a whole new world for us because it made us have a much more financially have a bigger support from international, but also open up the curiosity of seeing what is it in the international market that we should be careful about, that we should be aware of. And it made us, as we're doing now, launch the international division, which shall be getting closer to the international market and learning more from them. So in a way, as you say, when I grew up, I want to be a studio. We just became a studio a couple of months ago by growing this international division because we found that it is a very important piece of the model that would allow us to have better content by being closer to the international market and coming to places such as this one here to be closer to the audience that we have outside of Spain.
Unlike many other players, you haven't adopted the XXX Studio moniker. You're still Movistar Plus. But Dana, you're...
Give them time.
Sorry?
Give them time.
Yeah,
exactly,
we're all going to be Plus or Studio or,
We charge for our rebranding advice, by the way. But Dana, you started Yes Studios. What does the studio business model mean for you? Is it still best placed to exploit the opportunities of the global content boom?
Well, I think choosing to use that name, studio, and not to take it lightly. And for example, last night, anybody who was attending the ZF, Studios event up to, a few months ago, there were enterprises. And I think that goes into kind of what we mean when we say a studio. And it really is that all-purpose, production, distribution, financing. Hopefully, in our case, we also have a broadcaster attached. So we are owned, much like yourselves, by a multi-channel television provider based out of Israel. So we do have that green lighting ability in-house as well as marketing and obviously broadcast, which helps, and data helps, and knowing your audience certainly helps in that capacity. I think the main difference is, and anybody who was at the LA screenings I want to say like last week or the week before that, certainly felt it, and anybody in acquisitions and actually in this entire business. The old studio model where you had deficit financing by the big American studios and then obviously international distribution to offset those costs has gone away because the vast majority of the studios now have streaming platforms in tow, and they produce for themselves, and they certainly don't distribute outside of that vertical. So the opportunity that comes from, people like us and like you and everybody on the stage and hopefully many of you in the audience to fill in that gap, to create content that does have potential to being distributed and sold and broadcast worldwide outside of those set verticals. And also, by the way, to any of those streamers, that's a market too.
Mm. One thing I often hear when I've talked about this in the past is that it's just not realistic for anyone who's not already of major scale to think in the way that a studio thinks, to think about controlling different aspects of the value chain. Would you agree with that, Daria, coming from a smaller production outfit, or are there ways that you can adopt strategies that leverage that model and opportunity?
Well, this is difficult. This is quite a difficult question for me because I'm not only coming from first the production company that we founded. Well, it's quite young. We're just some years old. So compared to everybody who's on stage and to many of you, we're quite young. And also, well, the market itself, the Ukrainian market, even before the war, I cannot say that it was the market which was fully integrated into the whole international scheme of what we're talking about, which is the studio-based vertical integration model. We were on the way. We were building. We were getting integrated, but in a way, we were still in this transition stage. So, this is to answer your question. Well, difficult to say for me actually at this stage.
So, I mean, you mentioned, of course, and we know that your company is Ukrainian. We can't help but refer to and mention and ask you about the impact of what's going on there following the Russian invasion. What has been the impact on the industry and your ability to leverage global opportunities and continue to do what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I can say that now that 3 months already we have the war, this is the moment when the industry, we in the industry now starting to come back to at least think and talk about what has to be done next and what we really can do. Because the first months were mostly under shock, trying to see, okay, how do we survive? Physically and also business-like. And now we can see that, as a very sad and tragic stress, but sometimes this is what also brings you a lot of power and strength to proceed, to go further. And this is what I can see that in our market now, all the players, all the media groups, all the biggest production companies and studios and OTT platforms, they're all united in a way to leverage on the international collaborations and productions, which is now really going on very actively with all the TV markets. Because, I can tell you recently, just the last several years, they were quite intense for the Ukrainian market. There were many quite acknowledged titles which were produced and presented internationally into the OTT platforms, sold worldwide with the major distribution companies, like the DFs that we already mentioned, or Better, or other companies which were broadcast, Netflix everywhere. So in a way, this is the moment when we have to transfer into the big collaboration, which is going now a lot into all the discussions. But of course, the local market, this is, nothing can really be done. What is going on, this is more like the news feeds being arranged by media groups and put on all the channels. Some of the channels broadcasting more from the library content. but no productions and no new stuff that can be done now. Well, we're thinking about developing for the future, but of course there can be no market, there can be no business model for the moment.
Okay, so production effectively shut down, but development ongoing.
Development ongoing, and ongoing also thanks to the great support of our international colleagues we are doing it with. Well, thanks God, and we hope for the quickest development of the situation. Anyway, the good sign already in the market is that the shareholders of the media groups, of the channels, they're at least starting to look at the full situation to see, okay, what do we do next? Because it's not only the problem of production, of where to find the money and what is the next business model. This is also the problem of the library, which is existing in the market, because many productions which were done before, they were done in co-production with the Russian market, which is no longer possible, of course, for the future. So this is a big financial gap as well for the players.
And also physical production, which was a huge part of a lot of us producing in the Ukraine. We had a production that was supposed to go to Kiev just 2 weeks before the war that we had to move. So there's a huge financial loss on the physical production side as well.
Because Kiev was very much developing except for the full circle production, it was very much developing as a rental, business for international productions who were coming to film in Ukraine because, well, it's well done, it's high quality, but very cheap. Well, much cheaper than in Western
Today we talk
European.
about relative cheapness.
Yeah, this is it.
But it seems, well, at least there's a glimmer of hope that it will come back and you're still continuing to develop. So fingers crossed for an early resolution. I'm sure we all share that view. Let me bring it back, though, to the studio model. And Dana, you were saying about all the different companies that are now effectively operating as studios. You mentioned ZDF. We could add to that list BBC, ITV, Movistar. We could even add Netflix, Amazon, etc. And the old model was controlled effectively by a small number of large US companies with a 100-year history of making films in Hollywood. What have all these diverse new players brought to the business that is different, new, and what can we in the audience learn from what they've brought and what they do differently, perhaps?
Well, I think the major change that we all, and especially you said, how can you survive if you're a smaller outfit and you obviously don't have, the 100-year history and that expertise and that big legal team and the, whatever tens of salespeople kind of scattered around the world, and you can, invite everyone over for a great wine and dine in London or LA or, and attend all the markets. What do you do? And I think the key to that is collaborate. I think the old studio system, and until today, by the way, try doing a split package with a US studio, see what happens, how complicated that is. When you try to co-produce between two studios, I mean, the headbutting there, even internally between internal companies within a studio. And I think the agility that we have now as kind of smaller outfits that are much more open to collaborate, to share rights, to share expertise, knowledge, share obviously the financial burden that comes with it, and try to do what's right for the project versus what's right for the organization, which is a very corporate way of thinking. I think that's the big differentiator, and that's why, and our kind of uniqueness in the market and what can keep us going. So it really is, and I'm sure I speak for many here, I mean, that's the reason we're all here, is really to partner up, is to find opportunities to collaborate.
So agility and collaboration, classic disruptor business models. But Maria, your parent company is a large Spanish telecoms operator with operations elsewhere, but nonetheless, I guess from the old world, what does the studio bit and the Movistar bit bring that is different, and how have you seen the market opportunity evolve?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very interesting moment where trends are going in the different directions. You have on the one hand the US content that used to be that kind of content that everyone wanted to air, all of a sudden go kidnap into their own services and be no longer available in the market. And as a against trend, I mean a trend against the storm, you have the international content that has come with a huge volume and has opened up and changed the appetite for audience, which has facilitated many of us being grown-ups, according to the panel, and many of us becoming a studio, being out there. And I think it allows, on the one hand, this is a trend that is not going to go backwards. This is something where you have a much wider, a much bigger number of audience, international, that are looking for international content. And that is going to stay, which is a beautiful trend for us, being outside of the usual suspects, which were the US studios. And the model itself, it's open up to, is very big, disrupted to players like small studios or bigger studios. And I think it's a great opportunity for creativity worldwide. It's a great opportunity for learning and sharing content that is amazing around the world and being able to explore other types of creativity rather than the more typical or more archetype of US content, which I think is a great for many ways.
Can I just challenge that assumption that audiences want international content? I think audiences just want content. Technology has facilitated a lot of what we do in the languages that we produce in, and you don't have that problem because you're like the third most spoken language in the world. But smaller markets who have very unique languages like Hebrew, the opportunity to dub and subtitle, for example, into English, that's a new thing. That's only been around for like 6 years. I know it sounds ridiculous because a lot of you from certainly Western Europe are used to hearing all shows, including English language shows, dubbed into your native language. But for us, that was never an option until Netflix came along and decided to dub Hebrew into English, which, by the way, we were fighting tooth and nail for them not to do. Thankfully, we lost out that battle. But that has really kind of made it much simpler for people, no matter where they are, to sample content, no matter where it came from. And then I think once they like it, and they start following, a certain filmmaker, a certain star, for example, the stars that came out of Squid Games. We can't have a conversation about international content without Squid Games. And then suddenly you're looking for them in other shows, then that opens up an opportunity, the opportunity for international. But I think originally and at heart, people just want great storytelling.
I completely agree, but there's a component of cultural information that people are it's something new for the audience, to see Orthodox and to think, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Or, to look at some of the shows, when you look at now Tokyo Vice, and you learn about the, Japanese culture in the 90s. There's something there, and that is like an extra character, which is the culture of the country. And we all of a sudden have entertainment that comes with all that big volume of information and cultural knowledge, and which I think, I do think people are getting used to it. And rather than have another cup show, which is fantastic, which is great with all the explosions and all the followings and all the, the typical US pattern show, to have a very Italian, a very Spanish, it's amazing. I think we're very lucky to be in that place, and that is something.
And I think it's a conversation we should have, with the acquisitions people and with the commissioners, because to your point on ultra orthodox, I mean, Stiesel, which is one of our shows, went on Netflix at the end of 2018. The first season was produced in 2013, and then the second one in 2015. And trust me, every acquisitions person, saw it. All passed. So
I love it.
You love it now.
I love it now. Yeah.
But you love it now because there was a global streamer that came into place, took that gamble, translated it, and made it available, to whatever countries and territories. And now it seems like a thing. So I think there's a lot of education to be done still with the kind of gatekeepers that do decide what goes on services, and we shouldn't just leave it to the streamers to pick up those shows. I think it's an ongoing.
That's a good point.
It's both very valid points, but there's definitely an acceptance of international content that wasn't there before, and it's been driven by the streamers. But I want to sort of bring the conversation into the audience in a way. There are going to be a number of telecoms operators in the audience, other platform operators, who are maybe thinking, how does this apply to me? What is the inflection point where it makes sense for a platform or infrastructure owner, or indeed someone from another part of the value chain, to get into production and distribution and financing of content? What's the switch, if you like, that makes people do that?
I feel like I should come clean and say we too are owned by a telco.
Yeah.
So yes, it's owned by Bezeq, which is the Israeli telco. Just like many others, we can commiserate.
So what's the why do it? What makes you make that move?
You all of a sudden you are in a very different league. The relationship to your audience changes dramatically when you're coming up with content that is original content that speaks to them, content that is being done locally with the roots and the cultural pattern that is coming from the market. For us, it was a complete game changer. All of a sudden, we were not seen as a platform, we were seen as part of the community or part of the cultural, the Spanish culture. And the DNA of the things we do is things that are not being done before, things that would have not been produced. Things are very, very much unique in a way that they don't come. There's not a mix of a couple of series, but there's something very special and very relevant for the audience and very surprising. And it really starts a dialogue and a conversation with the press, with the social. When we talk about certain topics, it starts a dialogue with the audience, and it's put us in a very different place. I think with series, you have this case where people do not like a series, they become real followers, right? They're almost religious about a series, and people will subscribe to a certain platform just because they're capable of seeing a series that there's so much. People tell you, I'm so excited because whatever, the second season is coming up. People are very devoted to the series, and being able to add that wow effect and to provide that experience to your audience puts you in a very different position, in an unquestionable level. And I think that having original content is absolutely magic to any brand and to any platform. So it's more a question of, is financing making sense, or is the model making sense? But in terms of quality and in terms of the projection you want to have to your audience, original content is a must.
I think it's very optimistic and sounds lovely, but having worked, for a telco or at a telco, I think many times it's approached from a totally different perspective. And what you're talking about is definitely from a content, mentality, because people do feel attached. I think sometimes, and that's what, for the telcos here should be the takeaway, but I know it's very difficult because they're in a very different type of business. They're interested in 5G and, super high frequency fiber stuff. I don't even know what it is. It's a very different world from what I am, and a totally different ROI. And sometimes it's a little difficult to get, your board and your big corporation to understand that what we do takes time. It's a little bit of trial and error, especially if you're starting out. You're going to be producing not so great things, and then you're going to be producing great things. It takes a long time. It's an uncertain business. You're not always going to make all your money back. So there's a lot of things, to answer your question about what's it like, why should a telco do it? They should do it because it's right, because the content is what's going to differentiate. But also, you need people there who understand that this is a different line of business. It's not an automatic switch that you can turn on. So it's a challenge for any of you considering it. Just saying.
This is from all the discussions that I had with the telecoms when we've been discussing, like, okay, at what point are you ready to go into this new stage of development? And I remember they would say, oh, well, to tell you the truth, they told me, I wish, the guy who was the CEO, he told me, I wish we didn't have to do it. This is so difficult. This is such a different model. All these content creations. How do you do it? There is no objective way to see if it will be successful or not. He said, I hate it. I don't want to go to this, but I have to. He said, I just have no choice, because if I don't do, I will lose my market. It's not like you do it also, maybe, I don't know if it corresponds with you, Marie, your vision, Marie, and your shareholders, but the way he said, it's like, we don't don't have a choice, because we will either lose the audience that we have if we don't go further, if we don't develop into this direction.
Yeah, I think there's two approaches: the defensive or the proactive. And I want to think that the proactive way of thinking makes you feel better. I think that it's hard when you talk to a CFO of a platform or a CFO of a telco, and you tell them, well, listen, maybe there's going to be 3 shows until one has the breakthrough. And they go like, what do you mean? What can we do that one first? And you go, no, this is not how it works, okay? It's like, yeah, but let's keep
Just do that one. Don't do the other 3.
Let's keep the 3, okay? Let's go for the one that is a breakthrough. And then you go, no. You have to understand, we don't know which one it is. No one knows anything. And they get confused. Excel doesn't like that formula. And you go like, yeah, but Hulu and Handmaid's Tale, that was the breakthrough, And you have the Crown for the Netflix UK, or House of Cards for Netflix. How it changed it from being just a platform of technology to being something you wish for, and it turns, it's something you have to wait for. So the biggest problem is the state of mind, and having the space where they trust the content and they have the patience and the knowledge and the space for content to develop. And we're very lucky because at Telefonica now Movistar, the last 6 years, we have developed 52 seasons, 39 new series, and it's been a great support. And they have had a blind trust on it. And so we're very, very lucky. But it's been also a great number of successes that on the local market has changed the name of Movistar. It's not only a telco, it has a heart. And it shows up on magazines that report about content, and it shows up the number of times it gets named on the press, linked to things that are related to young people, that are related to topics that are in favor of. It's very positive. So I hope I'm encouraging many of you, okay? So I'm doing best I can.
You're the optimist, I'm the pessimist, or the realist.
Let's talk about rights and the deal making that's going on today. Maria, your company's just launched an international distribution division. Clearly, you utilize your originals in your own market, and then you flog them to other people. In a way, that's the old studio model. Dana,
Did you just say flog them to?
Flog.
Yeah, like
British slang.
Yeah, just like throw them at someone.
You mentioned collaboration as one of the ways to move forward, but collaboration surely brings with it rights sharing, which in a world where global rights are increasingly in demand, how do you square the circle of that old approach to rights and the new demands for rights from particularly the streamers?
I mean, there's various models, which we can discuss now or later. We can plug another conversation we're doing, I think, at 2:30. So I think we're going to be discussing a lot of that.
Consider this a trailer to entice even more.
This is like the 101 version, and if you want to get into deep, like what is co-production, acquisition now, pre-buys, so come back at 2:30. We can do the 2.0 version. But it really, everything's changing. And I think one of the reasons a lot of the studios, the traditional studios, have lost favor over the years, and this is even before the kind of integration that we've been talking about, is really they were so set in their ways. If there's acquisitions people here kind of go like this, you know what I'm talking about. They had a certain way of doing things, right? You could only get a show for this long, this much exclusivity on this window. We were all going through the digital transformation, and they were like, no, you could only put it on your digital service, for 5 days and then take it off on the week. It was ridiculous stuff like stacking and sounds like a nightmare when I talk about it now. Those things have all gone away, and I think you have to be pragmatic when you're either doing a pre-buy or a co-pro, or even on distribution. You have to listen to who you're working with, see what they need, and really try to give them those rights. Otherwise, there's not going to be a fair exchange. There's no one person holding, the rights in perpetuity forever and ever, and kind of doling it out, based on who comes in at what time with the highest price. So I think there needs to be a conversation, a pragmatic approach. And look, if you're taking money from people to help fund your shows, then you are going to have to give up rights. period. I mean, there's no other way to do it. And you have to make sure that you're doing it with someone that you trust, someone that's going to help you both monetize what you've just produced and hopefully grow that pot, through distribution. But it's about, being a realist, I think, today.
But there is certainly an impression in the market that the demand, at least from Netflix and others, is for global rights, and that's end of negotiation. But
it depends on, look, I mean, certainly if you're going to be co-producing with a streamer, then yes, you're most probably going to have, and the reason it's a co-production is you're going to have probably your original commission in your home territory, and then a streamer is going to probably take the rest of the world and some kind of a second window in your territory. There's no example that I can think of where they haven't taken a second window in territory and the world. But I will say this on acquisition, certainly we've had this experience just recently with a show called The Beauty Queen of Jerusalem, which just launched on Netflix in May, in select territories. And for me, this was, I want to say, my 5th series with Netflix that I've launched and with the service, and this is the first time they kind of chose the territories. They said this is something new that they're going to try. So obviously, at least on the acquisition model, there is more things there is a conversation to be had even with a streamer. And the way they approached it, and I don't want to speak for them, and unfortunately they're not in the room, but they kind of looked and said, all right, we have enough data now on shows coming from Israel. We know where they over-index. We know where they do well. These are the shows we're going to buy out. We're going to, obviously localize them for those markets, but we're not going to buy out the world. We're not going to localize 35, dub languages and whatever many subtitle languages. We're going to keep our costs down. I want to say this has something to do with, their quarterly reports, but it really doesn't, because the deal was done tail end of last year. So I don't think anybody could have foreseen what was going to happen to the stock. But I think it's an interesting trial. It certainly leaves us, or yes, at this point, as the content owners, more territories to sell. If we happen to do well on Netflix, I'm sure they're going to come back and say, we want to buy out more territories. There's suddenly brand recognition, and you have territories, that you can still monetize. So I think that's an interesting new model. At least it was new for me, and hopefully, there's a lesson to be learned. There is a conversation. There is more flexibility. There are interesting ways to hopefully window again. So it's not a one-size, global buyout with a streamer, and that's it.
And I think this is also a great, at least for me, this is always a very interesting and exciting exercise to look how you can, what is the best business model for the product. Because of course, well, as you say, well, when you have a streamer, well, there is not much you can do. This is mostly about the global rights. But well, with all of this, like immense and extremely interesting opportunities of these international collaborations where you still have different channels in different markets on where you work on this puzzle, I think this is, well, you can still do a lot as a production company if you have the original concept and the format and the idea, which is really accepted well internationally. So, and we're, well, for example, I have different experiences, but some of them are quite successful as a case where we managed to keep the rights and that we're selling, distributing internationally as a format and as a ready-mades. So, well, of course, it's not about Netflix or a streamer where it gets much more complicated, but still there are many models which are available for a production company to still try and leverage on this international sales. And then, of course, the second question is the exposure. I mean, what is the exposure you want to reach? What is more important for you? I mean, this is to get Netflix on the deal or Amazon, or to get the exposure on the terrestrial TV channels, because this is always different. Like now, well, it just makes me thinking of the latest case that we do. In Ukraine, we're now producing a package of documentary films, which we are like want to show to the world about what's going on in the country, what's about the war. And of course, the main idea is, okay, we will...
Exposure.
Of course, at the end, it can be also about the revenues, which we will reinvest, and of course, but the main thing is exposure, and what is the best scenario then? How to distribute, which model to use. So it's always a very interesting exercise that you can do with each project separately.
I think that the answer to that, if you're a content creator, is absolutely exposure, by the way. I don't think any one of us, spends 5 years doing a drama and then hoping few people watch it. You want to have as many people as you can. I think with distributors, that's always a conversation. This is a real quote, and I won't say which studio it was. I come from acquisitions. I did acquisitions for a really long time, and I once had a conversation with a big studio executive, and I said, well, we want to have, additional rights, whatever, on SWAT. And he says, well, we can't. We don't want the title overexploited. And I said, what does that mean? It's like, well, we don't want a lot of people to watch it because that'll ruin the title. I'm like, do you realize what business you're in? Like, you don't do this if you don't want to get your titles showcased. So for me, it's not really a conversation. I will always take a big, I don't want to say global, but a streaming deal, because I know the rush and the ride that comes with that and the opportunities that opens up for the producers and for the content makers later on. So you might be taking a small financial hit or a smaller financial hit on this one project, but opening up an entire world. So for me, that's never a conversation. I know when that is. But I do want to say one other thing. When you are piecemealing, and again, if you're doing a co-pro with a streamer, you're going to be left with little to no rights. But barring that, and especially if you're going with a pre-buy or an acquisition or co-pro, there's a whole set of rights that we can now exploit. I mean, obviously format, there's prequels, there's sequels, there's movies being made, there's musicals being made from TV shows, there's merchandising, there's NFTs. If anybody wants to explain it to me, please do. I want to make money off NFTs too, but allegedly there's lots of money to be made in that. Obviously gaming, depending on the show, is things. We've had things for Fauda. We do an escape room, we do an outdoor experience, we have a merchandise line. So there's other things that you can, and that show is on Netflix, by the way. So there's a lot of things you can still work with, be creative, and don't think of your show as just a one-hit kind of, especially if we're talking about distribution, just.
So it's an important point about building franchisability, ancillary rights, intellectual property, etc. And leveraging that as a...
And by the way, and saying yes more than you're saying no. If any of you have worked for an old studio, most of the time they are taught to say no to things. If you're small and agile, you don't have time to say no. You're just like, yes, we'll try it. Yes, we'll try it. Would be my kind of advice to anybody. Yeah.
I wanted to add something because there's a new currency, and you name it very well. The new currency, which is when you do a deal making, is relevance and is exposure, and that is really a currency that is on the table when you do a deal. And I think that is, rather than us looking for a way of distributing it worldwide and having a higher ROI, it is the exposure and being able to provide to the talent behind the show the biggest global success. And I think it's a responsibility that we have as a platform that has commissioned a show from talent that wants to really be out there and has dedicated huge amount of hours to our content, is to provide them with the best platform possible internationally. And we don't have an international platform, and therefore, and that is the reason, and that's what I'm getting into, that the deal making and the model we go into is the one that supports the bigger exhibition and exposition and the biggest reach and the biggest promotion. There's so much content out there. It's nothing new for us to think that there's 1,000 new series coming up into the world next year at least, which have a very, very good quality or a very average, above average quality. In order to stick out and to have an audience, you need a platform to believe in your content and not to be an acquisition title that is not part of their line. And that is what made us change the way we look at providing our content as originals from third parties that have not produced the show with us, and trying to have them be part of and feel that the content is also theirs. So all of a sudden you open up a discussion with platforms where they say, we want to be called original. And you go, yeah, you didn't really produce it, you know that, right?
Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that, by the way. Just because something is called up original doesn't really mean they produced it. I mean,
But it is the door you have to cross for them to promote your content. And that is a very interesting, slippery conversation. But
it's a small dent to the ego. It's worth it, I think.
And it's definitely something we are open to and we're doing now, which opens up a different discussion. So you can have a content that is going to be original in 3 different platforms in 3 different parts of the world.
That means you did well.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
would be success in
that
my
means
book.
that was a good, exactly. That is. Exactly.
I'm going to come on to, I was going to save this till last, but I'm going to come on to it now. And people who know me will know that I'm known as a great optimist. And I'm going to ask something quite pessimistic now. So I'm going to call it and say the world is heading for a global recession in the fourth quarter. Scale, size is a great way to weather an economic storm and other global issues. And the studio business model, part of it is about scale and about controlling all of the distribution, production chain, etc. But if I'm right, well, in fact, you can
First of all,
say...
we're already in a recession. Why are you waiting? Like, why is it fourth quarter? Like,
Some places very close, but you can say I'm wrong. But what I guess what I'm asking is, we would all accept that there are headwinds, as people like to say, in the industry. What are your predictions, each of you, for the next 12, 18 months in the business?
should I?
Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, this business is a little bit like an island full of penguins. So I'm very worried about the first penguin has jumped into the sea. So we have to keep a cool head and understand the numbers and the magnitude of the importance, the penetration of pay TV and the role it plays. And there is this big concern about the path that Netflix has taken, especially on Wall Street, not necessarily as a real number, but as a maybe proof of wrong concept, hitting that label, which is something that is not good for anyone. As this is the last days of the fat cows, as we say in Spain. But I think entertainment has come to a place where it's not going to go backwards. The consumption, the number of hours, the appetite for international, the appetite for good content, the interest on providing the content to the market is a trend that is going to stay, and the macroeconomics of the world are not going to the best days. But I think television and audiovisual is a must for many of the platforms. We're glad to see platforms being subsidized by other services that send you things home, that have escape rooms, or have cruisers, or have theme parks, which are going to help the subscription bumpy road ahead, and telcos that are going to be supporting the business. But I want to put some light into your negative perspective.
So there's the optimist. Any more? Any more optimists?
Usually in times like this, right, it's either the biggest ones that survive or the smallest ones to survive. So it's your kind of other. So I wouldn't be a mid-sized kind of distributor studio right now. I think that certainly is a little bit more challenging. But I will say this, I mean, we are producing maybe too much at this point, and reviewing what we have and what we should go into production under kind of new economic models is not a bad thing. Not every good story is a great series makes, and by the way, you'll find that a lot of things shouldn't really be a series. There are other opportunities to produce. I do want to bring up non-scripted here, although I know everybody here is really into scripted, and that's cool. We all are, but non-scripted has really taken off in the last kind of couple of years. It's quicker to produce, it's cheaper, there's less risk involved. People are watching more and more non-scripted. COVID has dramatically changed people's viewing patterns. It's not just this isolated niche, for smart people wanting to watch a 90-minute documentary. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Selling Sunset is a legitimate form of entertainment, just like anything else, and people are watching it even more than most Netflix dramas, just on sheer numbers. So there's that to look into, less risk and, cheaper budgets. So I think, as creative people, we will be creative, we will weather the storm. And it's a good time to revise. I mean, look what happened. We just went through 2 years of pandemic where we thought we were never going to produce again. And look how much good has come out of that. So, it's okay. It's going to be fine. I feel like I'm the optimist too. Okay. But just be pragmatic, shed the things you shouldn't be making and look at other avenues and
good. The glass is half full again.
I can tell you, well, you are not lucky today to have 3 optimists on stage, because I can tell you, well, I just went briefly through all the big crises I saw already in our industry, starting from 2008, which was the world crisis. And I very well remember what happened. Of course, there were like salaries which were going down, teams decreasing, consent decreasing in volumes and costs, but still, what happened afterwards is was very healthy stagnation, I would say, if I can put it that way, in the market, where the best creative teams, they survive and do even better, when the best production companies and studios, they develop even in a better and more efficient way. So anyway, it's not bad. Then, well, we had our crisis, which was more like a local one in 2014, after the first events that happened in Ukraine when Russia took the Crimea and started the war. So, and that was a big change, the huge change for the Ukrainian market, a huge crisis which changed the full scenery on the market. And we went through that. And the last 8 years after 2014, I can tell you, well, it was difficult. We had to go through many crises. But the end result that we were having the last couple of years, the market was starting to really boom. So I'm positive, absolutely, that whatever is now, like, as you say, there will be this recession. This is always at the end for the better of any creative industry. For me, there is just, I'm sorry, I cannot give any bad forecast for you. Good. Not at all.
Good, so we end on a happy note. I was going to ask everyone one final question, which was, what is your one key tip for everyone in the audience to make a success of their life and their business? But we're completely out of time. So if you want to know, you're going to have to come up and
You have to buy the book.
Come up and speak to us either after this session, at the drinks tonight, and you can find out that one key tip for success. Other than that, it just remains for me to say thank you for coming, and thank you to each of my panelists, Maria, Dana, and Daria. Please join me in a big hand. Thank you.
Thank you.